Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to this 2018-2019 Pacific Division preview of the NHL. What I'll intend to do here is quickly whip through a lot of information that I've compiled about each of the 8 teams in this division. I'm not necessarily going to make predictions, but I will give you some facts and information that might help you with projections of what to expect from this division this upcoming season. I will say this, like a lot of people, I do think out of these 8 teams, one of them could very easily represent the West in the Stanley Cup Final, and obviously one of them could very easily win the whole darn thing in 2019. So top to bottom, the 8 teams in this division, there's a lot of interesting stories, but I think the 2 most compelling teams are right at the top. The Vegas Golden Knights, defending the West, defending the division, still thought of largely as an expansion franchise, even though now they're in their second full season and with no signs of letting up. They've made some moves we'll get into, so they remain interesting. In fact, last year I think they were the most interesting story in all of sports. But not far behind that has got to be the San Jose Sharks. Within an 8-month span, they add 2 of the biggest names out there in Evander Kane last year before the deadline, and now Erik Karlsson heading into this season just a day before training camps opened. So in terms of attention, I think Vegas and San Jose are going to get the brunt of that, and for obvious reasons and for good reasons as well, too. So top to bottom through the division, here we go. Let's begin in alphabetical order. In Anaheim, the Ducks coach is Randy Carlyle for the 3rd consecutive season. Last year, 101 points. They finished second in the Pacific Division. They have made the playoffs in 6 straight years, but I do want to point this out. Last year was the first time they didn't win the Pacific since the 2011-12 campaign. So something new for them. The end of their regular season not only looked fine, it looked great. They went 10-1-1 in their last dozen games, including 7-0-0 at home. Then, in the playoffs, they ran into the Sharks, and San Jose took care of Anaheim in dominant fashion, a 4-game sweep, and they were out just like that. The biggest story for Anaheim last season will continue over, unfortunately for them, into this season, and that is injuries. Cam Fowler missed the entire playoff series last year. He also missed 15 regular season games with shoulder and knee injuries. Ryan Getzlaf last year missed 26 games with a facial fracture. Kessler and Eves both missed a ton of games last year. Eves missed 80 games with post-viral syndrome, I should say. And right now, Kessler and Eves, their statuses are uncertain as Kessler comes back from hip surgery, and now Eves has a shoulder injury that he's battling, so they're optimistic, but no clear sign of how good they'll be from the start of this season. On that note, we do know Corey Perry. What a freak thing this was. He's going to miss 5 months, expected to miss 5 months due to surgery that he needed to fix his MCL and his meniscus, which he injured in warm-ups prior to a preseason game. So very unfortunate for Corey Perry. Some will look at the Perry injury and say that's the major blow. Quite honestly, though, when you look at Perry's goal totals throughout the years, they have been in decline each of the last 5 seasons. In 13-14, he hit 43 goals. The year after that, he was down 10. The year after that, he stayed at 34, so he actually bumped it up 1. But in the last 2 respective seasons, 19 and 17, goal-wise for Corey Perry. Now, I'm not saying that to bring him down, but I do want to point out the biggest name on Anaheim is a guy that probably flies under the radar. He has led the team in points and goals each of the last 2 seasons. That's Rickard Rakell. Last year, 69 points and 34 goals, which were both career highs for him. So again, with Anaheim, the big thing is injuries. They survived it quite well last year. How much can they repeat that going against the grain this season down in Orange County? How about the Desert Dogs? Arizona is next on our list here. Rick Tocchet, his second season as their bench boss, 29 wins last year, 70 points, put them last in the entire Western Conference. I said the Ducks have been in each of the last 6 playoffs. The Coyotes have missed the last straight 6 playoffs. Clayton Keller was their Calder finalist last year after he led the team in points with 65 and goals at 23. Had a quote recently where he was saying how important, how huge this upcoming season is and how much they want to make the playoffs. We'll get into some of the additions they've made and some of the contracts that they signed to try and secure things here in the short term and get a quick turn of the ship, so to speak. They've been going in a bad direction for a handful of years now, and I think they're pretty antsy to get this thing turned around. D-man Oliver Ekman-Larsson this summer signed to an 8-year, $66 million contract extension. Not only that, he was named the 4th captain in Coyotes franchise history. So again, they're trying to solidify a foundation here. 85 goals in the past 5 years for the guy they call OEL, Oliver Ekman-Larsson. He's only behind Brent Burns in terms of defensemen with goals scored. They also made that big move, trading Max Domi to Montreal for Alex Galchenyuk. That happened back in June, and obviously Galchenyuk was a pretty good scorer on the Canadiens, second in scoring for them last season with 51 points. The other thing they did was sign Michael Grabner to a 3-year, $10 million deal back in July. He's a great even-strength scorer in his last 2 seasons, 54 goals. 51 of those 54 have come at even strength. So again, this is a Coyotes team that's trying to build its foundation around something. I do want to point out some interesting stats here on the Desert Dogs. Last year, in terms of goals per game, 30th in the league at 2.51. In terms of goals against per game, 21st in the league. So a little bit better defensively at 3.06. But on the power play, 16.9%. which put them 26th in the entire NHL. All right, let's get to the Calgary Flames. They have a brand new head coach. Bill Peters is spending his first season up in Alberta. Last season, they were a 37-win team, 84 points. They finished 5th in the Pacific Division. But you may remember Calgary was very much in contention, lined up to be a playoff team through mid-January. In fact, in mid-January, the Flames held the 2nd spot in this division, but they finished the year going 12, 19, and 6. They really stumbled at the end down the stretch. They finished 5th in the division, 11 points out of a postseason spot. So it was an unceremonious finish for the Flames up in Calgary. Their new coach, Bill Peters, takes a lot of pride in the fact that there hasn't been a Canadian team to win a Stanley Cup in about a quarter century since 1993. So he's really hoping to bring that type of atmosphere specifically to Calgary. I think he's going to try and rally the troops around that the Flames can be that first team since then. Johnny Gaudreau, 25 years old now. Last season led the team in scoring for the 3rd straight year, 84 points and 60 apples, which put him tied for 7th in assists in the entire NHL. The other guy to watch out for, obviously, with Calgary is Sean Monahan, who turns 24 in a couple weeks, but led Calgary with 31 goals and was second to Gaudreau in points with 64. This is a player, though, in Monahan, who this summer had to have 4 surgeries, including one on his left wrist. He had both left and right sports hernias and also had surgery on his right groin in the offseason. So, again, I understand that's the perfect time to do maintenance, but that's a lot of work in a short period of time. So we'll watch out for Sean Monahan and how he begins this season. The other thing for Calgary was the acquisition of James Neal, who, as you know, was with Nashville 2 seasons ago, was with Las Vegas last season, so he's been to 2 straight Stanley Cup finals. But a big veteran presence, 5-year, almost $29 million deal up in Calgary. So leadership, he'll be bringing a lot of skills as well. He's scored more than 20 goals in each of his last 10 NHL seasons. So I think they're definitely better with James Neal up there in Calgary. And again, I think this is just a team looking to take another step forward as they enter this season. We should also point out their goalie, Mike Smith, set to become a UFA at the end of this season. A solid start to last year, but he had a groin injury. And as part of that, in the second half of the season, that's when the Flames really started to struggle. So not to put it all on their goalie, Mike Smith, but like a lot of good teams, like a lot of emerging teams, I should say, you'll go as far as your goalie can take you. Let's get to Edmonton. Todd McLellan, the former Sharks head coach, now in his 4th season up there in Alberta. 36 wins last year, 78 points. They finished 6th in the Pacific Division. Edmonton saw a 25-point decrease in the standings from 2 years ago to last year. Instead of getting better, they actually got worse. Of course, 2 years ago, they were in the playoffs. In fact, knocked out the Sharks in the very first round. Connor McDavid, look, how could you not focus on him? Well, won the Ted Lindsay Award, which is the MVP that's voted on by the players for last season. Also led this league in points at 108. He led the league in points for the second straight season. He's the guy that is the face of their franchise, and directly he spoke to the fans in Edmonton saying, "Thank you for being patient with us. We'll be back. I promise." End quote. So a lot of pressure on Edmonton, specifically with McDavid kind of at the forefront and at the helm of this team. 41 goals for Connor last year, which put him 6th in the NHL. But not to overshadow Leon Draisaitl, who doesn't play on the same line as Connor McDavid, but Draisaitl had more than 70 points again last year for the second straight season, and those two, kind of the Batman and Robin duo for the Edmonton Oilers. So again, one of those situations where if you focus too much on McDavid, Draisaitl is the guy that's going to burn you. I want to quickly point out this about Edmonton. They were the worst power play team in the league at 14.8%. Which just baffles me. I mean, you have Connor McDavid on your team, and you think he alone, with some setup guys, would be dangerous enough. But last in the league at less than 15% on the power play. They finished 25th on the PK at 76.7%, and 20th in the league in goals per game at just 2.79. So clearly you can see a little bit front heavy with Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. They need more of a team up there, and I've always thought, too, that Edmonton has done such a good job at drafting slippery forwards up front, but a blue line for them would go a long way, just like goaltending and Cam Talbot up there as their main man would go a long way to complement some of the young, talented forwards that they've always brought in up there. Let's get into the LA Kings. Head coach John Stevens there behind the bench for the second consecutive season. Last year, 45 wins, 98 points. They were the first wild card team in the Western Conference. They finished right behind San Jose for fourth in the Pacific. They were a team that got swept by the Golden Knights in round one. But I'm just saying that it sounds worse than it actually is. That's the best way to put it. It sounds worse than it actually was. Los Angeles only allowed 7 total goals to Vegas in the entire 4-game series. Los Angeles lost all 4 games by a single goal apiece. Right? So all 4 very close games, a low-scoring series. And you'd have to think that's the way that LA chalked it up. That's what they wanted to do, is slow Vegas down. They did, and they still couldn't win. So I don't want to make it sound like LA crashed and burned at the end. It's just that they executed their game plan. It didn't work, and they were that close. Ilya Kovalchuk is the big story in Los Angeles. He's coming back to the NHL after spending 5 seasons in Russia with the KHL. He signed a 3-year, $18.75 million deal. It's interesting. I honestly don't know what to expect. I won't even make any predictions or projections individually for him. I don't know what that's like to miss 5 years of the top level of hockey and then return back to it that many years older. We can tell you that in terms of LA's core group of players, they're getting up there in age. Anze Kopitar's 31. Alec Martinez, also 31. Jonathan Quick, their goalie, 32. Jeff Carter and Dustin Brown, both 33 years of age. Now, that's not to diminish their stats. I think all those guys are still capable of being the dominant players on that team, but it just goes to show you in terms of planning for the future. You know, you talk about windows, and everybody mentions that with the Sharks. It's definitely a factor facing the Kings heading into to this season. As for Kovalchuk, the Kings president, Luc Robitaille, recently said this: "We just want him to do exactly what Ovechkin does on the power play." So what does that mean? Just sit on the left dot and fire off one-timers? Also want to point out here, Anze Kopitar had a rough first season as captain of the Kings. His points and his stats dramatically dipped. 12 goals and 52 points his first year as captain, but last year bumped everything back up again. Career highs in goals at 35, assists with 57, and 92 points. Also want to mention, like I said, Dustin Brown, no slouch, had a career high last year, 61 points. And let's not forget Drew Doughty, the every year Norris candidate, it seems like, led the league in average ice time last year at 26 minutes and 50 seconds, so he's out there a ton. He also signed an 8-year, $88 million extension with the Kings. That was back in July. All right, 2 more teams, actually 3 more teams. Forgot about Vegas to get to here in our preview. Let's get to the Sharks. Pete DeBoer in his 4th season already with this club. 45 wins last year for Team Teal, 100 points, put them 3rd in the Pacific Division. As we know, they lost to Las Vegas in the 2nd round of the postseason. It was a 6-game series. Again, how can you not start with Erik Karlsson? That was a huge acquisition the day before training camp opened. And I really do feel like, and I'll get to this in a second, it overshadows the acquisition and the re-signing of Evander Kane, which easily could have been the biggest story for this team heading into the season. Scoring was an area that they needed help with, and obviously number 9 will bolster that. Adding 65 back on your blue line doesn't hurt anything either. So I want to point this out about Karlsson. Since he entered the league in 2009-2010, Karlsson and Burns are the top 2 scorers among D-men in the entire NHL. So since 2009-10, the Sharks have the 2 leading scorers on the blue line in the entire league. Last year, the Sharks finished 3rd in the Pacific Division for the 3rd consecutive year. We all know their mark of consistency now in the playoffs 13 times in the last 14 seasons. So this is a team clearly with high expectations that only get higher when you add 2 of the best and biggest names out there on the market in the last 8 months, like I said. Evander Kane, we hope he'll be here for a while, entering the prime of his career this summer, signed a 7-year, $49 million contract. That happened back in May, so it didn't even take very long after the postseason ended for San Jose. In fact, obviously, he re-signed with San Jose before the Stanley Cup final was even over. But he joins other young prolific scorers like Logan Couture, who last season had a career high with 34 goals. It was a great season for number 39. And Joe Pavelski, whose goals were down a little bit, but when you look at his point totals, 65 points for the 5th straight season, 65 or more. Pavelski consistent in the production. I also want to point out, too, Pavelski was injured for half the year. He also had the difficult role of switching from winger to centerman in the absence of Joe Thornton when he got hurt back in January. And on that note, for Joe Thornton, he missed the last 35 games of the regular season. I've talked to him since then. This is his 2nd major knee surgery and comeback within the last 2 years. He actually says coming back from this one is easier and better than the first time because he feels confident he did the first one the right way. He knows what he's doing. Obviously, he would rather not be doing this, but there is a roadmap to speak for number 19 in this comeback. DeBoer recently saying about Thornton, quote, "If you ask me where he is today compared to a year ago, his first day of camp, there's no comparison to that," end quote. So that's the San Jose Sharks. Let's move on to the Vancouver Canucks. Travis Green, their head coach for the 2nd straight season. Last year, 31 wins, 73 points. They're a lot different now from the get-go without Daniel and Henrik Sedin, the brothers retiring after the end of last season. A Vancouver team they had been with since 2000, 2001. They were drafted together, played all those years together, and inseparable, but now absent from the Canucks. Also, their team president, Trevor Linden, stepped down back in July. So a lot of faces of that franchise no longer. That being said, they have one of the best young names in the game in Brock Besser. He was a Calder finalist last year after leading the Canucks with 29 goals. And I love this quote by Henrik Sedin on Besser. He says, quote, "Besser is the most natural goal scorer I've ever played with." So if you're Vancouver, nice to get somebody to be excited about in the absence of the Sedins. Obviously, their roles, their games were changing, and they didn't want to go out on a low note. They wanted to go out on a respectable note, and you have to respect that as well, too. So the Sedins no longer around. Vancouver had trouble scoring last year, 26th in the NHL at 2.66 goals per game. And when you look at who was scoring their goals last year, they actually lose 3 of their top 5 scorers from last season. The 2 Sedins at 55 and 50 points, respectively, between Daniel and Henrik. And Thomas Vanek had 41 points. He, of course, was traded to the Blue Jackets at the deadline, has since signed with the Red Wings back in the offseason. So Besser and Bo Horvat are the only two of the top five remaining top five scorers from the last season for Vancouver. And again, the Canucks finished second to last in the Western Conference for the third straight season. So they're a team that's still bottoming out, maybe, trying to reemerge. Obviously, Bo Horvat and Brock Besser are the names that they'll try and do it around, but a lot of work to be done in British Columbia. And last but not least, the Vegas Golden Knights. Holy smokes. Gerard Gallant, his second season, the team's second season in the NHL, where last year, their inaugural campaign, 51 wins, 109 points. They won the Pacific Division. Obviously, they represented the Western Conference in the Stanley Cup Final, but they lost to the Caps and Alexander Ovechkin in 5 games. All this after starting last year. This time last year, they were 500 to 1 odds. You want to talk Vegas? 500 to 1 odds to win the Cup. And they came that close to actually doing it. Back in September, they acquired Max Pacioretty from Montreal in exchange for Tomas Tatar. They then signed Pacioretty to a 4-year, $28 million extension. I think what they're doing in this deal is sending Tatar to Montreal, a player with maybe more upside in the future, and getting a player right now with leadership like Pacioretty who can contribute to this team and can kind of fill in for the absence of James Neal, a veteran presence and a guy who's obviously excited to come into a group that's winning right now, unlike what's happening in Montreal. As for George McPhee, he had this quote on Pacioretty. I thought it was interesting. Quote, "He doesn't have to be a captain. He won't be the captain. We have 23 captains," end quote. So they're trying to go still with that team atmosphere, that team vibe in Vegas, and you have to respect that because obviously he got the job done last year. Pacioretty isn't the only addition. Paul Stastny signed a 3-year, $19.5 million deal in Vegas back in July. And then how could you not talk about their top line last year, which was prolific? Jonathan Marchessault, Wild Bill, William Karlsson, and Riley Smith. That trio all set career highs in terms of points in the regular season. Marchessault had 75, Karlsson had 78, and Riley Smith had 60 points. And Karlsson is kind of the standout of this trio. 43 goals and leading the NHL with a plus 49 rating at the end of the season. So that was pretty amazing. That was a total breakout season, and it has a lot of people saying, well, yeah, great, but can you match that this time around? Karlsson said recently, quote, "It's me betting on myself a little. I believe I can have another productive year, show that last season was no fluke, and earn something long-term," end quote. So up front, they're stacked. This is a team that now has the experience. They have the camaraderie. They're just continuing to build on what they did last year. We shouldn't exclude Marc-Andre Fleury, their goalie. Also became a face of the franchise last season, posting new career highs in goals against average, or should I say lows, at 2.24 a game. Also a new career high with a .927 save percentage last season. This in a year where he missed 2 months last season with a concussion. Obviously came back and didn't have any problems to lead his group down the stretch. He was also rewarded for last season with a 3-year, $21 million contract extension that actually kicks in next season. So Marc-Andre Fleury expected to be around for a while with the Vegas Golden Knights. And one quick note about them, their D-man Nate Schmidt has actually been suspended for the first 20 games of this season after it was found that he violated the NHL's policy on performance-enhancing substances, something that Nate himself and the team have both publicly disputed. It was a trace amount of this banned substance, like almost an amount that shouldn't even count. Clearly, a lot of people are saying it was a mistake, Schmidt included. But nonetheless, the league has decided to hold to their suspension of 20 games for D-man Nate Schmidt. So there you go. The 8 teams in the Pacific Division. Last year, 4 of them made the playoffs. I have a feeling that this division is only going to get more competitive. Again, you have the 2 teams up top that are going to receive a lot of the attention in San Jose and Las Vegas. But Anaheim, Los Angeles, I really do think that Calgary and Edmonton can both take steps up this season and also be contenders. It's going to be interesting, it's going to be competitive, and we look forward to this season in the Pacific Division. Hey, thanks for checking out this video. If you liked what you saw here, don't forget to hit that like button. Also, subscribe to my channel. I'll look forward to making more of these videos throughout the hockey season.